So you're wondering, what are the seasons like living in Oklahoma? My name is Kinsley and I'm a local realtor here in Oklahoma City, Edmond metro area, and I love getting to help people every single day and helping them make Oklahoma their home. Whether you're thinking about moving in 10 days or 10 months, I would love just to be able to connect with you and potentially help you on your move. I'll have all the ways that you can reach me in the description box below. So in this video, I want to walk you through the different seasons of Oklahoma. To give you some context, I live in Edmond, which is just north of Oklahoma City, and I have moved a lot throughout my lifetime, as far west as Colorado, as far east as Florida, and honestly lots of different states in between, from Tennessee, Alabama, Oklahoma, Mississippi, and I think I've been able to see a pretty good range of what seasons are like across the country, relatively speaking. Now, some people here in Oklahoma say that there's not 4 seasons. They say that really you just get hot and cold, nothing in between. I tend to disagree with that. I think that there are 4 seasons in Oklahoma. They're not all going to be equal. So summer's not going to be just as long and just as enjoyable as fall is or spring is. But I think that as a whole, you do see 4 changes. You do see the 4 seasons. And so I kind of want to talk through what each of those seasons looks like. First, I want to talk about spring. And so kind of think March to May-ish. Your temperatures are going to range around 50 to potentially 80 degrees, just depending on the day. I would say in the mornings could still be pretty chilly, and by the afternoons, you're going to start to get into some of that warmer weather. This also tends to be known for some unpredictable weather with severe weather, specifically looking at Oklahoma and the tornadoes. And so you might have some more rain. You might have, again, more weather threats in the springtime than you might in some of the other seasons. The landscape, you're starting to see a lot of that green start to show back through, maybe starting to see flowers bloom, leaves go back on the trees. And so I think it does tend to be a really pretty time of year. You still might get some of those cooler times and some of those, starting to look kind of drab, but for the most part, I think overall you are starting to see a lot more color. Summer, think June to August, but honestly, this last year, it felt like June to October. It felt like it was so hot for so long. And that is one thing that I would say is been not the best thing about living in Oklahoma is the hot summers. It does feel really, really warm. Think mid 90s to over 100. Sometimes in the evenings you might get into the 70s, but there can still be quite a bit of humidity at times. And so because of that, it still feels pretty muggy and warm. And then like I said, this last year, it really seemed like it lasted until like October, that we were still in the 90s. And really those August, September months, it felt like we were over hundreds for most of those days. Because it's so hot, the landscape can seem a little bit dull unless you're watering your grass all the time. The grass can sometimes dry out. This last year in our backyard, we got this crack in our backyard from drought. It's like a drought crack is what I researched. And because we will sometimes water our front yard, but rarely do we water our backyard. And it was so dry that the ground literally started shrinking, and we just didn't get a lot of rain this last summer. I think every year is different, but especially this last summer, it just tended to be a more dry summer. And so that's something that, of course, can happen. Next is fall, which is probably one of my favorite seasons, and kind of think going on consistency, September to November. Of course, it can be hot past this, and honestly, this last year it stayed pretty warm throughout the fall time as well, but you're going to see it go below the 80s, maybe staying between that 50 to 80 range, similar to what you're going to see in the spring. You're going to see generally clearer skies, low humidity, some of the best weather, I think, especially when it follows this specific timeline of seasons. And I guess that's where some people maybe say that there aren't really seasons because it gets so hot and then it gets cold, but there is still some time in there, whether it's a few weeks or maybe a month, maybe even a little over a month, where you do start to see warmer temperatures before it just drastically changes to really cold weather. And when you're looking at the landscape, where we live on the western side of Edmond, there's not as many trees, but as a whole for the state, even on the eastern side of Edmond, you're going to start to see the leaves change. You're going to see red leaves and orange leaves and the beautiful colors of fall. That's one of the reasons I love it so much. And so you're still seeing a lot of those fall changes. You have lots of things to do as well with pumpkin patches and corn mazes and just different things that happen in the fall season that makes it really fun and festive. And so I think you're going to see that throughout the state, especially I know where we live here near Oklahoma City and Edmond, we get a lot of those opportunities in the fall time. And then finally is winter. So think kind of December to February. They generally tend to be mild, I will say. However, there can be a lot of variability with that. Think 30s to 50s most days. However, it can get colder than that for sure. One of our first winters living here, it was in the negatives for at least a couple of days. Now, I guess that's the thing that might be different than some other areas. It doesn't usually get negative and stay negative for super long. Or if it does get even like in the single digits or teens, it might be that way in the mornings, but by the afternoons, it's going to be a little bit warmer. Or if it does stay that cold all day, that's not going to be the whole season. That's not going to be December to February. You know, you're going to have some different ranges. Some years you see a lot more ice. Some years you see some snow. I will say from our experience living here so far, we have found that it typically ices, and then if it snows, it'll snow a little bit, but because the ice is on the ground, it can make the roads a little bit harder to navigate. Of course, every year looks different, but generally, I would say they tend to be milder. Last winter was a pretty mild winter in my opinion. Again, we moved from Nashville to here, and so like last year, a lot of our family that still lives in Tennessee, they got like I think over a foot or two of snow, whereas last year we didn't see barely anything. And so last year was pretty mild for us. Next year could be different. We'll kind of see what happens. Definitely start to see the grass turning brown. It's getting colder. Things are starting to die. The leaves are starting to fall off the trees. And, you know, kind of like a lot of places, it gets darker earlier. The days are seem a lot shorter. And so that's, again, pretty common everywhere. But it does kind of still have that dreary feel to it. That's not always my favorite. Cold and trying to just figure out ways to make that winter season cozy. So there's kind of a quick overview of what the seasons look like in Oklahoma. Again, every year is different. If you watch this video in 3 years, it might seem different than what I'm talking about now because maybe we have 3 years of extreme winter or 3 mild summers. That would be kind of nice. I think, at least from my experience, from what I have seen, there are 4 seasons. Of course, they're not equally as long. Summer tends to be longer, seems to be the longest for sure, but I do feel like there are still seasons. I hope this video was helpful for you. If you're thinking about moving, if you are kind of looking at what that could look like for you, definitely feel free to reach out to me. Thank you so much for watching this video and watching it till the end, and I will catch you in my next one.